It's been 3 days since the Taliban captured Kabul and seized control over the dreams of millions of Afghans. The women of Afghanistan fear the worst at this point, a repeat of what they had to endure during the Taliban's previous rule. And as the Taliban return to power in the country, what does the future hold for Afghan women? Before we get to that, I want to take you back in history, precisely 50 years ago. The pictures on your screen are from Kabul in the 1970s. These young women are attending universities and schools. They haven't covered themselves up from head to toe. They are attending parties, going out, living their lives. These pictures offer a glimpse of what life was like in Afghanistan before the Taliban took over, before their brutal life clamped down on women and their freedoms. After 20 years of gains, these freedoms could be lost in days, but the women of the country are not giving up. Over the next 30 minutes, I bring you stories of Afghan women, their struggles, their fight for freedom, and their undying resistance. Joining us live on the broadcast is Nadia Hashimi from Maryland, United States. She is an author and member of Afghan American Foundation and U.S. Afghan Council for Women. Nadia, thank you very much for being here with us. The Taliban have been talking about securing women's rights, but this will be as per their interpretation of the Sharia. No one knows for sure what that means. Do you fear a repeat of what happened during the previous Taliban rule?
You know, it matters less what I fear, matters more what the women and the girls of Afghanistan fear, and frankly, all of Afghanistan. Because what we're seeing so far is evidence that the people of Afghanistan truly do fear what the Taliban regime will mean for them, and particularly for women's rights and the education of girls. We saw in the hours before the Taliban took control of the country that the people in Kabul were even painting over walls that had images of women outside of a beauty salon because they did not want to be targeted by a regime that would, you know, see that as a disgrace and un-Islamic.
What do you make of the assurances that have been laid out by the Taliban during their press conference?
You know, these assurances are really a demonstration of the Taliban's evolution. You know, the Taliban claim that they have changed, that they are evolved. The one area that I would say they have definitely shown progress and an evolution is in their PR game, in their marketing. They have been able to rebrand themselves as a softer, gentler Taliban, despite the fact that in the past years, they have been an insurgency group launching violent attacks across the country and targeting key members of civil society, from journalists to people in government to activists. And this has been ongoing. And that's really brutal, especially disheartening when we hear people say, oh, what a peaceful takeover this was. This was not a peaceful takeover, even if the past few days did not seem as bloody as some people would have expected. That bloodshed has already soaked the ground. It has been ongoing.
Right. Stay with me, Nadia, as we further discuss what might lie ahead for the women of Afghanistan. And we've been talking about what the Taliban have had to say so far. Yesterday, they held their first press briefing after capturing control over the entire country. The first message to the world after seizing control, when asked about women, this is what the Taliban had to say.
They can get education from primary to higher education. That means university. We have announced this policy not once in international conferences like the Moscow conference, here in the Doha conference. Our leaders mentioned this in their speeches. So this is our policy. And we are really working on this in all those areas falling to us. In Afghanistan, there were thousands of schools, girls in schools, universities. They all are operating. To schools to teach, and also the students are going to universities. And even today, you may have seen the anchor of a news channel, a female. She returned to her job.
This is what the Taliban are proposing. Freedoms, but with a caveat. Women are allowed to have rights, but under the Sharia code, the burqa is not compulsory, but the hijab is. They are free to perform any roles, but within the limits of Islamic law. In a sense, a false sense of freedom, one that the Taliban are championing. Nadia, coming back to you, if we just take a step back and talk about the hard-fought gains that the women of Afghanistan have had over the last 20 years and the fears that these gains could be lost in just a matter of days, and the journey that the women of the country have seen over the last few decades.
And that's really what is so heartbreaking. You know, when we look at an Afghanistan that is grieving, when we look at a diaspora that is grieving, we're looking at what has been lost. The profound loss is really what is stunning us, that we could lose so much so quickly, because those of us who have been paying attention to what's actually happening in the country have seen that women are involved in all spheres of governance and of business. There were 2,500 women entrepreneurs in the country. There were journalists, there were judges, there were students, there were athletes. We had people compete in the Olympics. And all of that is at grave risk right now. I hear what the Taliban are saying. I hear that these declarations that are being made that they will honor women's rights. But I'm also hearing reports from within the country that in certain places that women were being turned away from the university when they showed up, and that women were being turned away from their workplaces when they appeared the day after the Taliban had taken control. So which of these is going to be the reality? The Taliban know that all eyes are on Kabul, that the international community's attention is on Kabul right now. They know that we don't have the bandwidth to pay attention to what's happening in the provinces. They also know that we don't have the bandwidth to continue to pay attention for very long. And so what will happen 3 days from now? What will happen after August 31st? What will happen 2-3 months from now? That's really where we're going to have a test. And that's really where the international community owes it to the women of Afghanistan, to the future of the girls of Afghanistan, to continue to pay attention and have some oversight that the Taliban do honor these promises, these glowing, beautiful promises that they're making, that they are reformed and will respect the rights of women.
Indeed. Nadia, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast with those perspectives. And as we talk about the fight for Afghan women's rights, here's one story of freedom and resistance. The story of Afghanistan Governor Salima Mazari. Mazari was the governor of Charkint district, a rugged mix of mountains and valleys about an hour south of Mazar-e-Sharif. As the Taliban targeted her, she did not buckle down. Instead, she recruited men for the battle that lied ahead.
Our people didn't have guns, but they went and sold their cows, sheep, and even their lands to buy weapons. Whenever there is a fight and there is no ammunition, people buy their own ammunition. They are on the front line every day and night without getting any kind of salary from anyone. Many were martyred, but no one even asked about them, unfortunately.
Mazari has now been captured by the Taliban, the same Taliban that say that they respect women's rights. It's not surprising that her march irritated the Taliban. She disregarded their archaic diktats, championing her identity as a Hazara Muslim, a community long targeted by the Taliban. Women like Mazari represent the spirited resistance of Afghanistan. Their battle is multi-layered. They fight to defend their homeland. They fight to protect their own rights. And they also fight for the future of young Afghan girls all over the country. For more on this, joining us is Maryam Vardak from Washington, D.C. Maryam is the founder of Her Afghanistan and has been at the forefront of this very fight that we are talking about. Maryam, your assessment of what the Taliban have promised or have claimed during their press conference regarding women's rights?
Well, it was definitely an improvement, an advancement and progress of public relations on their part. It seemed very positive and it seemed very bright, but most importantly, it was very generic when it was referred to women. And generic terms are now left to a blank canvas for the Afghan Taliban to fill. And this is why my organization has called out for all religious scholars around the world to hold religious discourse with one another and including the Taliban to fill this canvas. Because what does it mean for women to be under the Islamic framework. There are many layers to this, and this is something that the Afghan women should also be participating in. I think that we have to be extremely cautious and monitor the situation very closely. My girls on the ground have informed me yesterday when they had stepped outside, it seemed reasonable for them to go. There was just a few questions about their whereabouts, but today the men were acting harsher. When I asked them why, they said that we questioned them, that why are you being so harsh with us? We're just attending to our work. The Taliban members said that they've been mistreated by the women the past few days, being thrown. Shoes have been thrown at them, food has been thrown at them, water has been thrown at them. So there's a lot of grievances by the Afghan women and what they're feeling, this uncertainty, this anxiety, this fear. So we're monitoring the situation closely should be important for all of us observing Afghanistan.
Indeed, and as we monitor the latest coming in from on the ground, Maryam, stay with me. The women of Afghanistan are definitely not convinced. They are wary of the Taliban's words and remain highly skeptical. The streets of Kabul were relatively peaceful today, but thousands of women in the capital were missing from the streets. Women in Kabul do not seem to be venturing out of their homes as they remain cautious about what life would be like under the Taliban's rule. Reports say that business is booming at the burqa stores in the capital. During the Taliban's 1996 to 2001 rule, it was mandatory for women to cover themselves up from head to toe. The thick blue garments, a repressive symbol of the Taliban's rule, once again becoming an expensive must-have item, making their comeback in the shops of Afghanistan. But a small group fought back, chanting and holding up signs in a small protest against the Taliban. These visuals on your screen have gone viral on social media, a message of resistance as the Taliban took over Afghanistan. Maryam, we've been playing out those visuals coming in of the protest that was organized by a small number of women in Kabul. Let's just talk about the amount of courage that it takes for these women to actually come out on the streets, hold that demonstration in a huge sign to the entire world of what they are fighting for.
Absolutely. These women protested before the Taliban held their press conference, showing their resistance and their resilience and their courage and how they organized it. And these courageous women should be commended. And it was interesting to watch the video and how people were reacting. They were so unsure on how they need to behave with them. So that was quite interesting. And the other interesting aspect is to see, as soon as the Taliban did provide their press conference, thousands of people have come out in Jalalabad and in Kunar protesting against the Taliban. So it seems that if there is a strong resistance, it's starting to grow. And I think that the Afghan Taliban need to be extremely cautious that if they want to operate as some sort of government, they must operate under humanitarian law and be able to give these women a strong stance in society. Another aspect that I do really want all of us to pay attention to is the fact that although the Taliban have had a shadow government, operating and functioning government in today's society in 2021 is quite different, especially with the advancement that all the Afghan people have made. So watching them and knowing that how are they going to be able to fill this hole? I understand recently that there are individuals who are returning to home. Returning to work in the government, right. High officials. I'm trying to find out if women are doing the same. I know one of our former colleagues, Sarah Karimi, is also there, and she is assessing the situation, whether she will return to Afghan film. And if she does, that will be a great stride for all Afghan women.
Maryam Vardak, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us with those perspectives. Fighting all odds, just one step away from her goal, she was set to create history by becoming the first ever female Afghan Paralympic athlete. But Taekwondo fighter Zakia Khodadadi's dreams stood shattered. When the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, Zakia Khodadadi will not be a part of the Tokyo Paralympics anymore, as the ongoing turmoil in Afghanistan prevented her from leaving the country. All commercial flight operations from Kabul airport were shut after the Taliban took over the Afghan capital. And Zakia, who was just about to create history, was forced to withdraw from the Tokyo Games. She was supposed to have landed in Tokyo as per the schedule.
I, as a female member of the National Paralympic Committee of Afghanistan, Para-Taekwondo, with all the struggles I have been through, I am currently imprisoned inside the house. I cannot even go outside around this house with confidence and with security to go out to buy just a few things for myself, to train, to check on how anyone else is, or for anyone to check that I am not left out of the competition. My family is based in Herat City, which has been entirely captured by the Taliban. Currently, I reside with extended family members in Kabul who don't have enough food to feed their own children, and I am an additional burden on them. I request from you all that I am an Afghan woman, and as a representative of Afghan women, I ask you to help me. My intention is to participate in the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games. Please hold my hand and help me.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.